Lamb with the 12th. So now it's a Jacksonville second selection. Getting this for the Ramsey trade back at the trade deadline. Obviously, they have a bunch of needs to address. To me, they're the least talented team in the NFL in terms of, outlook for the 2020 season. I don't feel like anybody at this position is really going to impact whether or not that they become the worst or the first pick in the draft or the third pick in the draft. I don't believe that there's anybody that's instant impact. Obviously, they do need some receivers, but they do have DJ Shark, who just made a Pro Bowl last season. They do have a couple of other guys that could help. They do need the tight end, but it's way too early for that. But obviously, to me, they need to address the defense with this pick after going with Justin Herbert. Losing A.J. Boye and Jalen Ramsey in the span of a year, who, 3 years ago were in the AFC title game, locking down as the best corner duo. Neither of them are there anymore. They don't really have any quality corners. They just lost a deal with, oh my goodness, who was that? Darqueze Dennard from Cincinnati. They couldn't come to terms with him. So obviously that's another huge loss in terms of, putting somebody there. Whole lot of corners to do it. But right now, Emory mentioned earlier, that Christian Fulton is a very solid player, and I believe that they will go with him right here. If I can find him. There we go. Yeah, Christian Fulton out of LSU will be the 19th pick. I'm sorry, 20th pick. Very solid corner. He really came on, especially in the title game, set the tone early. And I believe that he has a very, very good ceiling. He can roam. I don't know if he'll necessarily become an island corner, but he is a very good scheme corner if he falls into the right scheme. Obviously, that's a tall task ahead of him to be putting him the number one corner on a below average defense. But, that's another LSU player off the board that I believe can help Jacksonville in the long run. And now staying with that LSU train, I don't know if this pick is much more obvious than it can be, but, Justin Jefferson is still there. And he broke out with Joe Burrow this year. Look at those stats. 111 receptions, 1,500 yards, 18 touchdowns, just video game-like numbers. Philly, obvious need receiver. They were playing with street guys last year. They had a quarterback from Houston as their huge receiver down the stretch. And Alshon Jeffrey, even though he's still on the roster, I don't believe that he will be in the team's long-term plans. And, obviously they need to give Carson Wentz a reliable target that can be a great route runner. And there's not many more in terms of the second tier of wide receivers in this class that can do it better than Justin Jefferson. He just came on the scene, and with him and Jamar Chase were just phenomenal for LSU all season long. And, pairing him with Deshaun Jackson and quite potentially Alshon Jeffrey, if he stays on the roster, would be a very good wide receiver corps. I know that Carson Wentz loves his tight ends, but he's got two in Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. They need somebody to stretch the field, and Justin Jefferson can be that guy. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, many people loved him coming out last year. I did not, and obviously he did not pan out because even in a situation where they were dying for somebody to step up, he was one of the bigger disappointments in that corps last year. So I believe that Justin Jefferson at 21, Philly couldn't be happier. I don't think that there's any team in the next or 5 picks above them that will select him. I think that that's a very good value, and I think Philly should be very happy at 21 with that pick.
Yeah, in my mock draft, I actually had Philly moving up to 12, switching with the Raiders to get Henry Ruggs. Similar idea, using that speed. Justin Jefferson ran a 4 4.43 40 at the combine. And then he's played most of his time while he was at LSU in the slot, especially this last season. But the years before that, he played out wide, so he has the ability to do both. I think Justin Jefferson will be a Pro Bowl talent at the next level. So I really like that pick.
Absolutely. So now with the 22nd pick, Stephon Diggs was traded away to Buffalo a couple weeks ago, and Minnesota gained a second first-round pick. This is their first of the round, and they have a couple needs to address after losing a couple core players. So let's see where Emory says they go.
Yeah, so Minnesota has a hole in their back end right now after Xavier Rhodes left in free agency. Xavier Rhodes was not playing to what we had seen him play in years prior. I think that really hurt them. I think that wide receiver is a place they need to address after losing Stephon Diggs. And I think that there's actually another position that they could address. Riley Reef, he was not. He was a below average left tackle last season, and I think that could be a spot they might go. I know that Josh Jones is still out there to be picked. So I might and luckily for Minnesota, they have two picks in this first round to be able to address two of these spots, and then I believe they also have another pick in the second round at 58 to address the last spot. I think that these are just there's glaring problems for them, and so for me, if you take the best player at any of these three positions, and I think you win. For me, the best player at the wide receiver position would be T. Higgins. He's a tall, long, lengthy guy that takes the top off of defenses. And then at cornerback, I actually really, really like Jalen Johnson. He could do it for you. And then, like I said, Josh Jones. But with the 22nd pick, the Minnesota Vikings select T. Higgins out of Clemson, paired with Adam Thielen. T. Higgins is a guy I actually, in my mock draft, had going above Justin Jefferson. He was one of the best receivers last year, and he was, of course, across from Justin Ross with next year's top quarterback prospect thrown to him. He could possibly be – he had a 90.5 PFF rating last season, and he didn't play – he had 59 receptions, 1,167 yards, and 13 touchdowns, but he didn't play a lot of the second halves of any of the games, which is surprising to have such high stats for not even playing a lot of the second halves because they were winning by so much. I believe that this guy could, with his size, could really stand out. I think the biggest downfall for him was when he played in the title game and the semifinal game against Ohio State and LSU. He was only able to have 7 receptions for 85 yards. He has to figure out how to be good in big moments. I think that's his biggest thing. So T. Higgins to Minnesota.
Yeah, and I really couldn't agree more with their need at receiver. Obviously, losing Stephon Diggs was a big loss, but going cheaper and younger won't really necessarily hinder them in the long run. I mean, obviously, they run the offense through Dalvin Cook, who broke out last season with finally a healthy year, going to the Pro Bowl for the first time. And, they need to the biggest thing is they need to address wide receiver. They need to address the defensive line, and they need to address the secondary. Obviously, the secondary receiver are probably the 2 picks with the first round. You can go based on preference with who you believe that it will be. I believe that would probably be better to address corner first because of the plethora of talent there. But T. Higgins is a solid pick. He's been very productive for the Tigers. So it's a very solid selection. Now, with the Patriots, it's very interesting. They're very, in my eyes, they're in a transition. You know, losing Tom Brady obviously is the biggest that everybody knows about. But the thing is, they're not going to tank. And they have the best coach in the NFL regardless. So many people think that they'll be going quarterback, but I don't think that that's the move that they're going to make. I believe that the Jared Stidham talk that they're infatuated with him is real. Personally, I don't know if that is the guy for the long term. But in terms of this season, I don't know if that there's a guy that they would favor over him at the moment, especially in this draft. So, and the Patriots are very, very notorious or infamous, for trading down in this draft. They're not as good as they are developing talent. They're not the best at picking high prospects. In recent years, they've had a lot of reaches on draft picks and that have not panned out or have not helped them in the long run. And obviously, they're normally ones that develop talent and then release them into free agency later on, get those compensatory picks, trade up to get other talent that's looking to move into another situation or, you know, develop those late round picks. So obviously right now, I believe that they are going to trade down. Who are they going to trade down with is the question. At the moment, there is one name that comes to mind in terms of value for trading up to the 23rd pick. And I think it would be a very smart thing for this franchise to do so. So with the 23rd pick, I believe the Patriots will trade to the Los Angeles Chargers for the 37th pick, a 2021 second rounder, and a 2024 rounder. Top of my head, that sounds like a very valuable trade that New England looks to compile all these picks, especially in the later rounds next year, and, you know, maybe trade the farm next year for a top quarterback like a Justin Fields or even somebody else coming out. But I believe that in this class, I don't know if they're sold on Jordan Love, but I believe that Jordan Love could be a very solid guy for the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, he had a down year last year, led the nation in interceptions. Many people think that why is he a first-round talent? It's because he's a gunslinger. He makes those NFL-style throws. When comparing Justin Herbert and him, you have one guy that has been very good at protecting the football, but he also has not shined bright in the biggest moments for Justin Herbert. That's his biggest knock. With Jordan Love, he tries to do it all. And last year, that bit him in the butt a little bit, especially after they lost their head coach, their offense coordinator, and I believe 9 starters on the offense, not including him. So he only had one returning starter and not a great system, and he really struggled because of it. Going to the Chargers, I believe, that signifies that they will not go with Cam Newton. I'm not sure if that is the best move for them in the long term because, you know, you have a guy who's lost his last 8, finishing the last 2 seasons on injured reserve, and really in regression more so as a player since he won the MVP in 2015. Tyrod Taylor has won games. He took an underwhelming Buffalo Bills team in 2017 to the playoffs. He beat out Baker Mayfield as a starter in 2018, only to hurt his thumb and Baker break out on a Thursday night game against the Jets. So unfortunately, he's been a victim of circumstance. He obviously, I don't know if he is the long-term solution, but for now, I believe the Chargers will go into 2020 with him. And I think it would be a great idea to put Jordan Love behind him, sit him a year. And going forward, you have Hunter Henry, who is a up-and-coming tight end. I love Hunter Henry as a receiving tight end. You have Mike Williams, who is a great jump ball receiver that, you know, Phillip Rivers last year tried to connect to a lot, but he could not. In my opinion, the best slot receiver in the game, and Keenan Allen, who's been Pro Bowl multiple times. Austin Eckler, who had a breakout year as a receiving back. You have plenty of weapons going forward that are signed under contract for multiple seasons that you can put with Jordan Love, a gunslinger quarterback that after a year developing can really break out, and you could really look for the Chargers in 2021 to take over with a great defense, a very solid supporting cast, and I believe that is the best situation for Jordan Love, is to sit a year behind somebody who is proven. The team go forward, try to compete for now set a seventh playoff spot, and we'll see where it goes from there. But right now, I believe that is the best spot for him, and I think that that's a smart idea for the Chargers to trade up to get a second first-round pick in Jordan Love.
Not only that, they also got their tackle of the future earlier in the draft.
Rebecca.
And now getting Love makes a lot of sense to me just because he and Tyrod Taylor have similar playing styles, so you don't have to change the playbook depending on which receiver you get. I mean, which quarterback you're playing, and I think that has a lot to do with why teams have failed when bringing in a backup quarterback in the past. I think that this gives them the ability to just teach one playbook and really let these two guys run with it. And I'm not sure that I don't think that Jordan Love wouldn't be the starter by the end of the year. I'm not calling it. I think that he has a lot to learn, especially after going for 20 touchdowns and 17 receptions. But I think that he is definitely a first rounder. He gets to get picked in the first round just because due to his pure athleticism. So I like this pick a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, he could very well take over. But, it just depends on how it is. If the Chargers are struggling early on, doesn't make a lot of sense to keep on going with Tyrod Taylor if, 3 games into the season, they're 0-3 and he's playing poorly. Bringing in Jordan Love won't necessarily change the season and turn it around like the Titans did last season with Tannehill, but he could very well come in and be the same, produce the same, if not better, with a good supporting cast. That's the biggest thing, is that you don't want to throw in a young quarterback into the fire with a bad situation. We see that with Josh Rosen, how he went to the worst team in the NFL in 2018 with the Cardinals, with the worst line, not a lot of playmakers, and it really hurt him. Then he goes to Miami, and he's competing with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and the team trades away their best left tackle, and Devontae Parker did not develop he did not play well enough until Ryan Fitzpatrick stepped in, and he had nothing to work with. And now nobody's talking about Josh Rosen, who was a top 10 pick 2 years ago, and is all of a sudden people consider him a lifetime backup. I believe he can thrive in the right situation, but obviously he's been put and thrown into the fire, and it really has hurt him. So that's what you need to do with these raw quarterbacks, and I think that Jordan Love really can be a very solid starter for years to come if he lands with a good team.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I think the Chargers are going to be one of those teams that might surprise some people next season. I think they've done a great job in free agency. And now if this is the draft that they get, I believe that this could be a pretty monumental draft for them, especially getting the left tackle and then the guy and then the quarterback in the backfield. So I just think that this is a great move for them moving up here.
Absolutely. And all it takes is the proper compensation. I don't know if New England will be too petty with who they trade. I believe that they just want to trade back. I don't think that they love him enough to select him here. And, they love to trade back, accumulate those draft picks. And Chargers are close enough to where they don't have to give up the farm or a first-round pick next year to make that happen. So I think that's a great move, and we'll just see from here.
Especially going right before New Orleans, who's next on the clock. I think that they might have even gone Jordan Love if he would have fell to them.
Yeah, so speaking of the fourth pick, let's see what Emory has going.
So I think there's 2 options here, really, and we've talked about the guys that could go at this position. Kenneth Murray is the linebacker out of Oklahoma, and I think I watched the UT games, both of, and this guy is all over the field. He is absolutely everywhere. He's incredible at diagnosing plays, getting to the ball. He's faster. I promise he is faster on field than he is in his 40. But I think that what's going to happen with New Orleans is actually they're gonna trade out of the first round, and I had done this originally in my draft, and then I changed it due to just the amount of picks that Miami had. I had Miami moving up and getting Justin Jefferson here. But instead, I am going to agree with Cam and in his mock draft, and I'm going to say that the New Orleans Saints trade with the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts, I think that they are right on the edge of being a great team. I think that they are a dark horse to push for an AFC championship. I think that the Colts have a great staff. I think their coaching staff is incredible. They've done a great job in the draft before, getting guys like Darius Leonard out of small schools. And I think that they get a guy that fits what they want to do perfectly. AJ Epinesa out of Iowa. He's a guy that I see, just not truly developed as a player. He's a freakish size, but he just has some rough edges. But one guy that he never stops. You watch him while he's at Iowa. He just continues to play hard every play, and in the fourth quarter, he's still playing hard. He gets after the quarterback. He's not the fastest guy off the line, but he's probably the best player with his hands in this draft. He's able to swat and swim and get around bigger O linemen, even knowing he ran a 5.04 40. And he will play the weak side opposite Justin Houston in their defense, and I think he fits it perfectly. You can move him around on third down, put him at D tackle, allow him to do his thing against not as against guards who aren't as used to having good pass rushers against them. And I think that he could play 5 technique, 4 technique, inside or outside on the tackle. I just think he's one of those guys that could do everything. And like I said, that huge motor is always the guy you want on your team, a guy that really works hard. So I think that AJ Epinesa makes a lot of sense here for the Indianapolis Colts to move up to.
Yeah, and I think that's a very solid move. They need to address the other side of the defensive line. And the thing is, they don't have a first-round pick after the trading forward to DeForest Buckner, who will be a huge difference maker on the interior of that defensive line, who they struggled against the run at times last year. But the thing is, if you look, they have 2 upper second-round picks at 34 and 44. They have the capital to do the move. I don't believe they need to give up both second-rounders to make this move to 24, moving up.
They should give up the 34th pick and the 75th pick to move up.
Absolutely. So you still get your first-rounder, you get an all-pro, and you get a up-and-coming guy who H.A. Epinesa, had a tough combine. He ran under 5 flat. He didn't bench over 20 pounds. For the size he is, that is a disappointment. But like Emory said, his motor never stops. He is constantly disrupting in the Big Ten. He had 11 and a half sacks last year. I mean, he has all the tools to be a quality defensive end in the NFL, either at a 5 technique in a 3-4, or even as a 7 or a 9 as a 4-3. Obviously, he's not going to be a speed rusher. He's not going to be a guaranteed double-digit sack maker every season, but he will be a very good player that you have to prepare for. And they haven't had this kind of production since Robert Mathis or Dwight Freeney back in the early 2000s from this position. So I feel like that's a great move for them.
I think he reminds me most of Trey Flowers, who plays for the Detroit Lions now, but more so when Trey Flowers was playing for New England, and just how he had a high motor always. You watched him in the Super Bowl, like he just was always making plays that you just didn't expect him to make. I think that's what AJ Epinesa can do. And he makes plays, they'll throw a screen and you'll see somebody just come out of nowhere, and he's the guy that's just making the tackle like 10 yards down the field on a screen. And I think that's just something that you can't coach. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you really can't. So moving on, you got. Oh, gotta stop doing that. Moving on, you have Minnesota's second first round pick. Obviously, they addressed receiver with their first one. In my opinion, they need to address corner with one of these two picks. Um, you can't really go wrong with a couple of these guys. I love Jalen Johnson. He does it all. He is not afraid to put his nose in the dirt. Um, he plays from the nickel. He can play from the outside. He's not a guaranteed surefire Pro Bowler, but he's not going to be the reason you lose games. Um, Obviously, he hasn't been tested a whole lot because he is from the Pac-12. There's not a whole lot of quality receivers that he had to lock down, but he had some great numbers that he put up. I love him as a player, very athletic, and he is a good man-to-man corner that I believe that Minnesota needs. Xavier Rhodes was this guy a couple of seasons ago. He fell off for whatever reason, but I mean, losing Trey Waynes, losing Xavier Rhodes, you need to address corner somehow, some way, and I believe that is a guy that will instantly improve their secondary from where it currently is. Uh, I don't have any hate about him. I just love everything about his game. I personally love him more than C.J. Henderson, who is the 16th pick. But the thing is, you also have to see the value, and he's projected as an early second, late first. And I don't know if he's going to be targeted over these guys like Trayvon Diggs, Christian Fulton, C.J. Henderson. And so falling to 25, I believe, is a very solid value for the Vikings to pick him up. And I believe that he will be an instant contributor in that secondary.
Yeah, like Cam said, this guy, and Cam said he hadn't really played anybody in the Pac-12. I think that the biggest person and biggest challenge he had met was Laviska Shenault. And Laviska Shenault was last year's had the most broken tackles on the year. He's a great receiver. He's about I think he's 6'3" or 6'2", and he's just a beast. And during that game, he had 4 catches for 43 yards. But the biggest thing was, if you watch the highlights of that game, Jalen Johnson was always on the tackle immediately. Never let him get extra yards. Just was always ready to make the play. And I think that for me, Jalen Johnson is not the best cornerback in this draft by any means. Like, you've got your Jeffrey Okudah, who's a freak. You've got C.J. Henderson, who's a speedster. But I think that, like, to me personally, Jalen Johnson has the highest floor of any of these cornerbacks. I think that no matter what scheme he's in, he's going to be a good cornerback. He can play man. He can play cover 3, 2, whatever he needs to do, and he's good at it. And I think that has a lot – like, that means a lot in today's NFL. So Jalen Johnson, just being an impact player, he's gonna tackle too. That's something that you don't see. C.J. Henderson will not tackle. You don't get C.J. Henderson to tackle. You get C.J. Henderson because he's a lockdown corner in man-to-man. So I think that this is a great pick. I love this guy too, just like Cam. I think that this is one of those sleeper picks that's going to just jump out at you. And Minnesota's gotten lucky in this draft to me.
Absolutely. So, but team trying to get even luckier is the Miami Dolphins with their third first-round pick. 26 was selecting for them. They selected Tua Tagovailoa with their third pick, and then with their 18, they selected their offensive tackle, right tackle, Austin Jackson out of USC. They still need help in other areas, so let's see where Emory says they go.
Yeah, so Cam decided to take Austin Jackson, which I really like that pick. I would have gone differently at pick 18, but that's okay because the guy I would have picked is still sitting there on the board. We talked about how they brought in Byron Jones from the Cowboys and Xavier Howard, and they both signed to 5-year deals. So they'll be there for a really long time. And I think that the last piece on their defense will be a safety. I think that Adrian Colbert is not the guy. I think that Eric Rowe is a comparable player, but I think they need a guy that can play over the top of both Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. This guy, it's a debate which safety is the best safety in this draft. It absolutely is. You can say that Xavier McKinney is a better all around safety, which I believe he is. But if I'm picking a guy at this point with the guys that I have on my team, I'm going Grant Delpit. And I've talked to multiple people about how he has tackle issues. He misses too many tackles, and that's understandable. Like I that is not okay. You have to work on tackling. But the fit between Xavier Howard and Byron Jones is huge for me. I think that Grant Delpit is the best at a deep safety. He's a two-time All-American, and he won the Jim Thorpe Award for being the best safety in the country last year. And I just think him playing their deep third or deep half will just change that aspect and will make their 30th ranked overall defense look a lot better. I also know that their D-line and their linebackers, they're all new. It seems like I think they signed 5 guys up front. And so I think that they're trying to change the culture there, like Cam was saying earlier. And I think that Grant Delpit sitting in the back, playing safety, playing center field at 6'3", will just change it even more. He was only targeted 21 times in 2019, and he only gave up 196 yards and a score. He's elite in coverage. He's elite. He can play man against big tight ends. He can play man against speedy receivers like Tyreek Hill. I think that he just makes the most sense here.
Yeah, and I love Grant Delpit earlier, or also. Me and Emory, we've watched many of football together, and we were watching the college football playoffs, and I'm telling him I want the Cowboys to pick him at 17. I want him to pick him at 17. And I believe that he's the best safety in this draft as well. Obviously, there's a tackling issue there. And, he's not a dynamic safety enough to where, he can make up for that. He needs to improve that area. I know he's a great in coverage, but, we'll just see how it happens. But there's a lot of teams that are bullish on him that believe he will fall in this draft. He was a projected top 10 pick last season. And even though he won the Jim Thorpe, who's the best, or the award for the best defensive back, he is still falling in many scouts' eyes. And I haven't seen one mock draft that has put him in the first round. That's not saying that he's not worthy of a selection, but, GMs and owners fall in love with the scouting combine, and choosing not to participate while waiting on a pro day, and then with this coronavirus thing canceling all the pro days that didn't transpire before or after, I'm sorry, that really hurt his draft stock, because now all they're looking at is the film and all the missed tackles that he had. And he actually got worse as time went on. His junior season was the worst in terms of tackling, and that might scare some teams off from selecting him in the back half of the first round. That's not saying that I don't believe that he's worthy of this selection, because that is a huge necessity for the Dolphins. I know you get Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. Byron Jones has 1 career interception. Xavier Howard, yes, he has 7, but, you just never know with him. That could be a one-year wonder thing, but we'll see how that goes. But you need somebody to pick up the slack from what Rashad Jones has really backed off of in recent years, and I think that that's a very solid selection at 26.
So now at 27, I've got the Seahawks, and the Seahawks, they've lost a lot of their pass rush since losing Frank Clark a couple years back, and they picked LJ Collier out of TCU last year in the first round, And I thought that that was a reach for LJ Collier. He was hurt during the spring ball, or during, I'm sorry, fall camp, and never really came back from that. I think that they need to get a guy that can really get after it, get after the quarterback. Um, and with this being the second edge, really the second edge off the board, um, I think that K'Lavon Chason out of LSU makes a lot of sense. This is the second back-to-back LSU pair. You can tell how good LSU was. I think we've had almost 7 picks from LSU in this draft already. But K'Lavon Chason is no slouch. He gets after it, and K'Lavon gets after it, and he really just he's a beast. Like, you look at him and you're like, wow, that guy looks like he could just take out anybody. Like, when he gets after offensive tackles, like, he's got pure muscle. Like, he can literally take them and pancake them. It's not a standing match. He's 6'4", 250, and he is got better bend than any offensive tackle will face or will face or has faced. And I think that he just makes a lot of sense here. There's other edge rushers that you could go with, but I think K'Lavon Chason makes the most sense for Seattle, especially even if I think they go K'Lavon Chason even if they can get Jadeveon Clowney to re-sign. He just he's got to be able to reach his full potential, but his floor is low, but his ceiling is so high. He could be an all-pro, and he's a special player if he can figure it all out.
Yeah, and he, like him said, he is a very solid player. Was very dynamic last season. He doesn't have the biggest size, but he's got massive speed, speed abilities on the edge. And the crazy thing is him falling to 27 is unprecedented, considering that many have him not lasting past the 20th pick. So that's very good value for the Seahawks, especially if they do not re-sign Jadeveon Clowney, which I don't believe at this point. It looks like it's going to happen. They do need to address the defensive end area. I also don't like, or not don't like, I was not a fan of the LJ Collier pick last draft. And I believe that he fits the bill in exactly what they're trying to do. And he doesn't play the same style that Michael Bennett did play, because Michael Bennett was a bully, but he can give that similar production in terms of rushing the passer. They were bottom 5 last season in terms of sacks, and they need to improve that area. And so they have to address with him or Yatir Matos, and I believe that's the best value right now, is selecting him at 27. So going on to the final 5 picks of the first round, Dallas Cowboys on the clock. They traded down from 17 to the Ravens, got an additional second-round pick, as well as this late first. Once again, they do need to address the defensive or the edge, also the secondary, and they also need to address wide receiver. But once again, I don't believe that they will do that right here. I believe that they're very upset that they could not snag K'Lavon Chason, but Seattle was able to snag him up. So I believe that they will go one of 2 areas. I really like A.J. Terrell. I believe that he is worthy of a top 20 pick. But obviously, those that don't dive in and watch film don't realize the type of player he is, because all they see is him getting burned by Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in the first half of the national title game, where all the eyes were on him. He did not play up to his standards. But then again, you got to look. He's facing the number 1 overall pick, one of the best receivers in this class, and perhaps the best receiver in next year's class. It's not like he's playing bad against scrubs, and he's a very solid player that can play in the run game and in the pass game. He won't travel, but he will play his side to a T. But I've also heard a lot of love from the Cowboys for Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan, who's the top interior lineman in this class. Um, a lot of people say he's just a dog. He's got experience at both guard and center. Obviously, Cowboys lost their captain in Travis Frederick. And if you look back in 2018, the run game really suffered, and so did the pass protection when he was not in the game. And you think center, that's probably the least important position. No, he's the guy that's communicating everything, and not only that, but he is the biggest leader. Zach Martin and Tyron Smith are all decade players, but they listen to Travis Frederick. He was the guy, and he was the leader on that line, and it wasn't the same without him, even with Joe Looney taking over. I heard they love him, and I don't believe that he will last until late in the second round, where they have the 51st and now 55th selection. They could trade up for him, but right now I believe that they need to go need over value. And so right now I'm going to go with Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan. Like I said, he's just a dog, and that will not be the sexy pick. That won't be getting a bunch of cheers in the locker room. But you got to realize that with the 31st pick in the 2013 draft, Travis Frederick was booed for being selected, and he ended up becoming a 4-time All-Pro and arguable Hall of Famer before he retired at 29. Dallas has drafted very well in recent years, and they do so by not reaching on – or I'm sorry, they don't do it by just picking the best player. They do it by addressing their biggest need. And, picking Travis Frederick back in 2013 or picking Zach Martin over Johnny Manziel, who was catastrophic bust, that is the exact move that they need to make. And with 2 more picks in the second round, they can address other needs like in the secondary or even at receiver, or packaging those picks or even others to trade up to get certain players. But I believe that there's no player that is sticking out in my mind that's a glaring left on the board right now. And I believe Cesar Ruiz is the pick for the Cowboys.
Okay, so the Tennessee Titans are on the clock, and I have full confidence that they need to replace Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin was a steady right tackle for them for years, and he really, obviously last season when they took off in the run game, him and Taylor Lewan are the biggest reasons for that. I don't think that they have a right tackle that is worthy of starting for them right now. I don't think that Dennis Kelly is going to start for them next season. So I think that their pick has to be a right tackle here. That being said, I think that there's 2 guys that really stick out to me. First off, you have to look at Josh Jones out of Houston. He's a monster, but he's a much better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. He got consistently better each year, which is something that is a really big deal at the tackle position, just in confidence and stuff. I think that I believe he had a 93 overall grade in pass blocking last year, which is the highest grade of any offensive tackle. Of course, he played in the American Conference, but that's still impressive no matter where you play. And then the other player that sticks out in my head is Ezra Cleveland out of Boise State. He was considered the second most athletic tackle in the draft, behind Tristan Wirfs. He had the 3rd fastest 40 in the draft last year. He could really help out in the play action game that they love to run there in Tennessee. And I think that for me, I think that the fit makes more sense with Ezra Cleveland, but the upside makes more sense for Josh Jones. So if I'm the GM of the Tennessee Titans, I'm going to personally pick Ezra Cleveland out of Boise State to play my offensive tackle and replace Jack Conklin. He's a much better run blocker than Josh Jones is, and they love running the ball there. Derrick Henry is looking to probably surpass the all-time rushing record next season with how well he played this year towards the end of the season, and I think that Ezra Cleveland can help pave the way. The first few games might be a little rocky, of course, which is anything for any rookie offensive tackle, and I don't expect him to just step in and be the guy. I think he'll have to work for it, but I think he is makes the most sense in the next couple of years of being the tackle of their future at right tackle across from Taylor Lewan and protecting Ryan Tannehill. So, yeah, I believe that Ezra Cleveland will be going to the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, and obviously they do need to replace Jack Conklin. It was very surprising when they didn't pick up his fifth-year option, and he left for Cleveland for the money. Obviously, they needed to address keeping Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, so they couldn't afford him. But they need to pick up a tackle. Personally, I believe that this is kind of a reach, but you can't deny his floor. Boise State does produce a lot of sneaky picks. Most recently, Leighton Vander Esch, who came out of nowhere to become one of the biggest bright young linebackers in the NFL. And who's to say Ezra Cleveland couldn't do the same thing? I personally like Josh Jones more, but it's all about fit, like Emory said. And Ezra Cleveland is a much better run blocking offensive tackle, and he could be a better fit. So no arguments from me here on that pick. So with the 30th pick, Green Bay, last 3-4 years, everybody seems to try to give them a receiver at the end of the first round. I've given up on that. Last year I had them picking A.J. Brown, I believe, but he fell to the second round to the Titans, and he broke out with 1,000 yards last season. So obviously they have one of the best receivers in the game, Devontae Adams. They need to address getting a second playmaker for Aaron Rodgers because in recent years, yes, he hasn't thrown the picks, but he's a gunslinger quarterback that isn't trying to gunsling it. He's become afraid to trust these receivers. Picking up Devin Funchess, who only played one game last year, many people forget how he's a big body, 6'5", 220-pound receiver who, had some up and down games in Carolina. But with the Colts last year, he was going to be a big part of the offense until he got hurt with a broken collarbone in week 1. And, he never came off of IR. So I believe that the Packers will wait for a receiver with this pick. And like Emory said, needing to replace quality players, Brian Bulaga was a very questionable let go for the Packers. He's been a very solid presence for the last 7-8 years for the Packers. Very reliable, doesn't miss games, and you let him go for a very, very modest price to the Chargers. So they need to address somehow, some way. In my mock draft, I didn't have Josh Jones going this far down, but I really like the fit here, protecting Aaron Rodgers on the right side, pairing him across from David Bakhtiari, who's a Pro Bowl tackle in himself, can really help him develop. This isn't the sexy pick, but it is the biggest need for them. They have not addressed it except for picking up Ricky Wagner from Detroit, who to me is a backup at best, a swing tackle. And so I believe Josh Jones right now is the pick. I don't know if there's any other guy who I would go at this value that I think would help them more next year to build off their 13-3 season than Josh Jones.
I completely agree. I had Josh Jones going much earlier in my mock draft. I wish I could have said that he went to Tennessee, but fit didn't make sense to me. And I think this is a great pick. I actually had Austin Jackson going there in my mock draft. So they actually, to me personally, got an improvement. I think that Josh Jones is a better offensive tackle prospect than Austin Jackson. So I'm excited if this happens for the Green Bay Packers.
Absolutely. And so with my final pick as a GM in this first round, I think it's fairly obvious that the 49ers will trade down at this pick. They don't have a pick in the second, third, or fourth round. But they did select CeeDee Lamb. But I'm sorry, Henry Ruggs with the 13th pick in the trade for DeForest Buckner. So, having the 31st pick, yeah, obviously there's people like Ross Blacklock or others that you could, help with some needs. But you need picks at this point. You don't have a lot of cap space, and you just need to not get so top heavy. That's my biggest worry about the 49ers following the footsteps of the Rams, who 2 years ago were in the Super Bowl, and now they're in one of the scariest situations. They lost $24 million to trade away Brandon Cooks and letting go of Todd Gurley, letting go of Clay Matthews, and all of a sudden they're very top heavy. Yes, they have the best defensive player in Aaron Donald, one of the best corners in Jalen Ramsey, but they also paid Jared Goff all this money, and they're not set up well for the future. And I think the 49ers could follow a similar fate when you have guys like Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas and just paying Eric Armstead. George Kittle's coming up, and Jimmy G has a huge deal. So you have a lot of guys to pay. You need to keep low-cost players, and I don't believe it makes sense to use this pick. So I'm going to have them trade down to who is the big question. I've got to look at the remaining prospects and see who has the biggest value currently. You have Zach Bond, like I said earlier, AJ Terrell, Yetur Gross-Matos.
Xavier McKinney would be the
Xavier
first one.
McKinney is glaring. Nobody has him lasting this far. Obviously, he's not falling out of the first round unless something comes up in terms of his health or his off-the-field antics or anything that comes in the coming 10 days leading up to the draft. He's going to be a first-round pick. The fact that he's fallen to 31 is insane. So somebody's going to come get him. To who, I'm about to tell you.
I think the Bears make a lot of sense.
The Bears do make a lot of sense. They do have, I believe, 2 second-round picks because of the Khalil Mack trade. So they have the 43 and 50. Let's see at the remainder or the top of the second round. We'll see. Let's see who makes the most sense. We've already had a few trades from top second-round picks, so we're going to have to remember who went where. But if you look at the top of this second round, I kind of agree with Emory. The Bears do make a lot of sense. They have 43 and at 50. Obviously, they won't have to give up both to move up 12 picks. And obviously, they lost Clinton Dix to free agency to the Cowboys. And, they have a good secondary, but not a great secondary. They don't have that game-changing playmaker since they lost Adrian Amos in the 2019 offseason. So they need to get better at safety. Emory, I totally agree. This does make a lot of sense. I'm going to have Chicago trade up with the 49ers for the 43rd pick, a fourth-rounder, and a 2021 sixth-rounder is what I'm going to say top of my head. So, yeah, obviously, Xavier McKinney. Like I said before, he makes a lot of sense at 17 or 16 to the Cowboys or Falcons, but he can roam. He knows how to tackle. He had 95 tackles last year. He can sack the quarterback. He makes plays. He forces turnovers. He does it all. And Alabama always has the defensive back prospects. Not a lot always pan out in the NFL, but he is one that has been durable. He has been very solid. He has been very consistent. Chicago needs to get better. They don't have much cap space to do so. Makes a lot of sense here. So I'm going to go with Xavier McKinney to the Chicago Bears at 31.
And I get to pick the last pick of the 2020 NFL mock draft. And so with KC on the clock, their biggest need, to me personally, is cornerback. I think that they are sitting some people would say that Trey Davis-Ward is a good player, and I think he's a good player, but I think he's underperformed recently. And Alex Brown is not going to cut it in the AFC West to me, especially with if CeeDee Lamb goes to the Raiders, Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton, all these guys that are top-notch receivers, and now in today's NFL, like I don't think that Alex Brown cuts it. So I think they have to go cornerback here. I actually have my favorite cornerback left is AJ Terrell. Cam likes this guy. I like this guy. He just makes a lot of sense. Him and Bryce Hall also makes sense to me here. Bryce Hall is less athletic. AJ Terrell is a crazy athlete, can do it all. Like Cam said, he got beat a few times in the LSU game. Well, I'm going to be honest, everybody got beat by LSU. Whenever they were on the field, LSU was just the better team. They have the better players. They have considered the best O-line, all these things. But AJ Terrell is a very fitting pro-style cornerback. Can play with the best of them, and I think he makes a ton of sense here at 32 for them. And I think that now they have a great young group in the back end with Juwan Thornhill, who was my favorite safety in the 2019 draft, Tyrann Mathieu, and I think that they could definitely put it all together again, make a run for the Super Bowl this next year. They were lucky enough to keep all of their pieces on offense, and now they're going to better their back end, and I think this is a great pick.
Yeah, that would have been exactly where I would have went. AJ Terrell is the best corner on the board by far, in my eyes, and you can put him arguably based on preference above the Trayvon Diggs and Fulton over the world. I would not be surprised if he did go 19. I've seen a couple of mock drafts have him going 19 to the Raiders. Couldn't agree more. I would not be surprised if they pull a shocker, take something out of left field like a running back, like DeAndre Swift. Damian Williams came on the scene late, and obviously he's been very important to their success, but he has not been very durable. And he is not the running back of the future in Kansas City. And it would make sense to me in my eyes, DeAndre Swift's one of the dynamic running backs in this draft, and as his pass catching abilities are second to none, and I think it would make a lot of sense, especially having him for 5 years on a first round contract would not surprise me, but still need is really important for the Chiefs to potentially repeat next year. And their secondary is not very good, and it's got even worse this offseason. So this makes too much sense right now to me. So after 2 long hours, that concludes our first 2020 mock draft. This was a lot of fun to me. Obviously, you don't have to sit through everything, but this was just a whole lot of fun to me to be able to do this. I'm a journalism major myself, and I'm hoping to be a sports analyst, writer, journalist in my lifetime, and I need this practice, and it's just a whole lot of fun. And Emory is the ideal guy to do this with. He played college football, 4 years at TLU, 3-year starter, and he knows his stuff in terms of how to play the game and scheme fits. I'm more of the historical nerd that knows a lot of things about the past, the present, and just from a logic standpoint. But he is the guy that knows those ins and outs of the football, and it was just a lot of fun to do this with him.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Cam. I had a great time.
So, like I said, this concludes the mock draft, and thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And, if you'd like to see more, please comment. Please do anything you can do. Please follow my website, thisjustin.video.blog. I post several articles about NFL content. Emory does his own stuff on occasion, but that's not his main focus. This is what I love to do. I love to do stuff like this. So please just do anything from liking, subscribing, critiquing me, as well as Emory, because he needs some critiquing too. But yeah, so thank y'all so much. It was a real pleasure. So.